Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Rinkside here with me, Ryan Steeves, and Emma Miskew. What's going on, Emma?
Hey, just enjoying the cooler day today. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly. That heat wave last week was unbearable, but yeah, everything's great. Emma and I were chatting. Now we're almost like 14, 15 episodes deep into Rinkside.
Mhm.
The engagement has been awesome. The number of people who've reached out to be guests, to suggest topics has been awesome. But I think how fast this all got underway, one thing we forgot to do was really get into our own backgrounds and careers a little bit. And so, Emma, great idea for this week's episode was to give our listeners a bit more background and depth to where we are today, how we got here, our athletic accomplishments, and what we went through. So, great idea, Emma.
Yeah, I thought that, some people might know me a little bit better.
Yeah.
Some people might know Ryan a
Mhm.
little bit better, some of our listeners, but we thought that why not talk a little bit about
Mhm.
not only like how did we get into sport, our childhood
Mhm.
sport life, what that looked like, but also just like a little bit of insight into our later athletic careers as well. So yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think that you might learn something new,
Yeah,
even if you do know us pretty well.
totally. Because I checked, you've got a Wikipedia page. I don't. I have different pages, but no, I think it's a great idea, and hopefully we give people a little bit of context, right, and behind the veil, so to speak. Because I've heard you talk about, for instance, your Olympic experiences and some of these more high-profile experiences. I've been drafted. I've signed an NHL contract, but what does that look like, and what is the pursuit of that, and how does it feel when you get to that point? So I think it's a great idea to sort of flag and chat about some of these things. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, here's what I know about you, Emma. You've curled your whole life. You're at the pinnacle. You're part of the best team in history. But what does it look like? These young girls, young boys just getting into it. What does it look like to choose curling as your thing that you sink your teeth into?
Yeah, I think it's a lot different now than when I got into curling.
Yeah.
I started when I was 5. My dad curled. He grew up, most of his childhood was in Montreal, and he played, his best friend's parents curled. So he got out. He loved it. So when I was at that minimum age to start, and it was a little, now you go and you wear a
Seems so
helmet
young.
and it's actually safe.
Yeah.
But we would just go out. I didn't slide when I first started. So if you know curling, you slide
Mhm.
out of the hack and let
Yeah.
the rock go. Like I just pushed the rock right from the hack because I was too little to actually learn to slide yet.
Wow.
So now there's actually programs. I think you start a little bit later than 5 usually, and then there's a little more safety with it. But when I first started, I actually didn't really care to go. There was hot chocolate and snacks. It was a 2-hour program every Sunday. And I loved the hot chocolate and snacks part, and the rest of it I was like, give her, like I could pass. I don't really care. And so I did that for a couple years, and then I started to get better at it. And then other young girls joined. And then I started to have a lot of fun because we would play games
Mhm.
little, and then even though they were just in the club and it was just for fun, I loved that competitive side to it and trying to actually do something in the game. And there was strategy, and you're trying to, there's so much to learn. So I kind of fell in love with it when we started actually going and competing against other clubs. So we made a little team. My brother was on my little team.
And what age is
With like,
that? What are we talking?
I feel like I was about nine.
Okay.
9 or 10. My brother, probably 9. And my brother is 3 years younger than me, so he was pretty little.
Wow.
And we went, they were called Little Rock Bonspiels. And so there were different ones in the city. So we went into our first one, and we didn't do great in the first one that we went to. It was a new experience, but then they had all these prizes at the end, like a prize table, and kind of everyone got some sort of prize. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then we went to another one, and we started to do quite well. And I started to make shots that I didn't really expect to make. And it was
Mm.
this really cool feeling of like, maybe I'm actually kind of good at this. So I joined a second day. So that was every Sunday. My dad was like, you know what? There's another club in the city that does Saturdays. So then I was signed up for Saturdays and Sundays in 2 programs. Met some girls at the other club on Saturdays, and they were going into like the citywide playoff, and they wanted me to be part of the team. So that was really cool. We ended up going and playing the finals at Lansdowne during the Brier that was being held there that year. And I mean, there's no one there watching other than our families, but it was a very cool experience playing on arena ice when you're 10 years old.
Okay.
And I actually played that game on that team I was on against Rachel, who is my
No way.
current teammate. So that wasn't the first time I had seen her. I had seen her at some other events, but that was the first time we played against each other. I was in awe. She was very impressive. And after that game, I thought I would keep playing with these girls that I was playing with that game with. And they actually said that they had someone else, one of the girl sisters, that was going to be joining them for the next year. And I was so crushed, so disappointed. We won that game. Our parents were like, yay. And I come out crying because they had told me that they weren't going to play with me the next year. And so my dad called Rachel's dad and asked if she would want to play with me the next year in a back to like regular size rocks.
Yeah.
And make a little junior team. And I've been playing with her since.
Wow. What a pivotal moment.
Yeah. So that was kind of the first years where then curling became more than just like a Saturday, Sunday thing. It became an actual full sort of like for that young, like it was all in. So that's how I got going.
Wow.
That's how, and like Rachel and I have been playing together since we were 11.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard. It's amazing to track these things, especially with these teams, these small, intimate teams that get formed. You can track it back to that moment. And had you gone the other way and had Rachel gone the other way, maybe this team, isn't what it is today, right?
Exactly. Or if in that moment those girls were like, yeah, we'll keep playing together, then maybe Rachel and I never would have played together. She would have got on another team. Maybe I wouldn't even be curling today. I have no idea. If I got on a team with other girls who ended up finding different life paths. And then I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll do something different too. So it's funny how just like one moment can just impact everything towards your future in a sport.
Yeah, certainly.
But I'll take a little break on my curling stuff.
That's cool.
How did you get started with hockey? Because you were quite successful.
Yeah.
You did play briefly for the NHL.
Yeah. So my story's pretty average, I suppose, for minor hockey in Canada. There's really, I get started in the Eastern Ontario region. I play for the Cobras, for those hockey listeners, which is now the Wild AAA, which didn't exist back then. I'm on skates at 3 years old. The highlight of my hockey career at those early ages is the outdoor rink, right? That's the experience. It was much more prevalent back then, even 20 years ago, right? The outdoor rinks are like kind of empty these days. Everyone's got fancy ones in their backyards. So the real formative years for me are on the outdoor rink playing against older kids. I sort of come through the ranks and I guess my big reflection here for kids is the talk now is all about how elite you are, how special you are. Are you in the top 10? Are you a top player in your region? I was never that kid. My achievements came when I was 15, 16, 17. So that actually, my experience in hockey really frames the way I approach coaching, and the way I approach it with my kids now is, you want to just be on this nice gradual upward curve in your sport, just developing. So, I was a really small kid. At the sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 age. I did my growing later at about 15, 16. And so, and the reason I say that is because I got cut from AA, which was effectively AAA back in those days, because I was too small. That's what the coach told me. And, I used that as fuel for the rest of my career. I remember, and I'll talk about this later, at the NHL Combine, you're getting interviewed by all these executives from NHL teams. And they ask you, who had the biggest impact on your hockey career? And they're getting ready to write mom and dad, as most kids would typically say, which is no different for me. But I said, was that coach in Pee Wee, really had an impact on me to teach me that, first of all, this game's not always fair. You don't get things just because you're owed things. You have to earn them. So that coach really had a big impact on me. So, I'd say my early minor hockey years were a struggle almost, in terms of being a smaller kid and trying to find ways to play and adapt and be successful. So for me, that was speed. I needed to be a fast hockey player. So my parents put me in some power skating when I was young. That seemed to make a big difference for me, especially as I sort of went through my little hockey career. And then, to fast forward, I I approached junior hockey, junior A hockey in the Ottawa region. I played for the Ottawa Junior Senators as a 15-year-old, which was very, very young, and played with our first Rinkside guest, Brendan Bell. We were both pretty young kids on that junior A team, cracking that lineup. And so that's where hockey really started to get more serious for me, and I started to end up on the radar, so to speak, in the Ottawa area. But it really wasn't until that point. So kids, if you're not on the map and you don't see yourself as being this top player on your team or top player in your region, just relax. It's this nice gradual curve that you want to be on. And I was fortunate to sort of develop at a nice pace in my hockey career.
That's so interesting, because I feel like we've talked about this in the past about the kids who are like naturally talented early or big early don't
totally.
always put the same amount of work ethic in as maybe some of the smaller kids who maybe got caught or on the lower, just made the team and were told that.
Right.
The ones who work harder in the end as they get older, no matter what you get told when you're young, are going to be the ones that are going to be successful. It's the ones who really want it and want to be coached, want to take feedback and all that. So you took that feedback and worked really hard.
Yep.
And
we have no choice, right? And I think size and strength at an early age masks a lot of issues. It can, right? And you get those advantages that just come from being big and heavy and faster. And the smaller players, for instance, really have to work hard and adapt their game, just to keep up, just to, win battles, whether it's in basketball, fighting for rebounds, fighting for your life, whether it's in hockey, whatever it may be, even soccer. Size is a big component, and that can dictate a lot of success early on. And I find, like me, I had this huge growth spurt. I actually grew in college. I don't know how many kids grow in college. So I kept growing. And these smaller athletes, once you grow in the sort of playing field, so to speak, levels, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. I'm now their height, I'm their weight. Meanwhile, I've been, slugging it out, trying to just find ways to adapt. And you still see it with players in professional, whether it's basketball, again, with a height difference or other more physical sports. They have to play a whole different game when they're smaller. And so yeah, no, you're right. There's a huge advantage to being young and big and faster. And that sort of starts to level out if you are catching up later in life. Yeah. So all right, so you and Rachel, teammates, best friends, that's your trajectory. You've hooked up. This is amazing. What's next? Let's fast forward here and talk about how this relationship forms and how that relationship is so special and how that fosters this competitive team.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we started, we're quite young. We went to different high schools, and you have that.
Okay.
And so did the other two players on our team. One of the other players, Allison, she was with us for quite a while. Like, we ended up playing with her for our entire junior career and then into the first few years of women's.
Yeah.
And she ended up moving to Sweden because her husband lives there. So the three of us were together for a very long time. So we kind of grew up and had those early teen years. We had our high school friends and that life, and then we had each other. And because it's a small team with 4 people, you do spend quite a bit of time together. It's not like a big team where you can kind of pick your little group and you just hang out with them and you make sure you're sitting with them. Like, we do everything together. So we started when we realized locally that we were actually quite good for our age. We were beating teams when we were 12, 13 that were like 19. And everyone, we were the annoying young team that they were like, didn't think we were that good, but we were beating them. So they were super mad. And we realized that we were good. So our parents signed us up for some events like bonspiels that were not just in Ottawa. So we started traveling a little bit more throughout the winter. So doing road trips to London and doing road trips like Toronto and all in between.
Yeah.
Play downs and all that. So we won our first Bantam Provincial, which is under 16, when we were 13 years old, won 4 of those in a row. And then we went into the junior ranks, which then leads to a national championship. There's a national juniors. And it took us a little bit of time to get to those national juniors. We lost the final a few times. It was like that expectation that because we had done so well in Bantams and we were the best team when we got to juniors, but we couldn't win the games that were important to get to go. So it was a bit of a struggle. You go through moments of the highs and lows of sport are real. And everyone thinks you win all the time, how it must be just great, but it's hard. When you lose at that age, you feel like the world is over. And then you work harder and then you win later. And then you're like, okay, now it was all worth it.
Right.
But those moments when I was growing up felt like doomsday. Like it was just like full, like,
Totally.
why do I do this?
Yeah.
And so I think like for any listeners, like if you're young and you have those hard losses, know that you're not alone, but do know that you do come out of them stronger on the other side. And I would say every single loss that we had when we were younger shaped us to be more resilient now to that, but also made us work harder.
Yeah.
And once you get past that initial sadness and letdown of a big loss or something, a moment that happened, or like getting kicked off that team or whatever it is, once you get past that initial feeling of doom and you use it and turn it into like to fire yourself up. Every time you have a loss that feels that way, it'll be a little bit less, but also the wins just feel so good. Like they feel so good once you've had those lows. If you won everything, it would just, you'd be numb to the winning. But it's those losses that remind you how good it is to win. And I think that sometimes as kids, you forget that. And sometimes as kids, it makes you want to quit. And I just want to inspire anyone else to say, like, don't quit. If you love it, don't quit because of a bad loss.
Yeah, it's really tough at those ages to accept the lessons of a loss, I think. But it's so great to hear you say that. And how much of this, without getting too much into it, how much of this was owing to the strength of your friendship? And is that really common amongst these curling teams? Our curling teams often looked at as, we'll do this for a period of time and then we'll move on, we'll get a new teammate. But how much of that is owed to the bond between you and Rachel or perhaps your other teammates at the time?
Yeah, I think that that's super important because while it is super common for curling teams to switch up or completely restart or get a new player or whatever, her and I have always gone through the highs and lows together. And not many teams do that. We could have easily just like been like, we'll part ways after some hard losses, including, like you said, we'll get more into it a little later, the Olympics.
Yeah.
And we always kind of came back to each other being like, we'll just get through it together. We know each other's work ethic. We know that we're both I know that she's going to work as hard as she can. She knows that I'm going to work as hard as I can. And we just trust each other so authentically. And there's not a lot of other relationships like that in sport. And I think that gets talked about a lot too, is just that, like, I know she knows how to get me out of a bad game or a slump or something, and I know how to do that for her too. We know each other so well that we can help. So even like the highs and lows of winning and losing, but I'm even talking the highs and lows within a game.
Yeah.
We know each other so well. So like that friendship that was built and that trust that was built from when we were younger helps us even today to know just like little intricacies about each other that can help during a bad game or a bad moment or feeling, like you're not confident in a certain shot. Like, okay, let's get you out of that and not just acknowledge it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even now, your team as it's constituted now, Tracy and Sarah, it seems like a really good environment for what you're describing. Watching you play, watching you compete, there's, curling's so interesting that you're mic'd up. I always find this interesting, the way other sports. It'd be fun to mic up some baseball players in the dugout. It'd be a very different TV experience. But hearing how supportive and encouraging, and, Sarah, when she talked about it when she was on, just managing the ups, right? Everyone talks about managing downs, but managing ups are important too. Yeah.
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 So that's a little bit about kind of our like teen years, I guess, because that's when a lot of this was shaped. And we ended up going to junior nationals twice. We won the second one. We lost the final in the first one. And we went to the Worlds, represented Canada, and lost the gold medal game after having gone through the round robin as the number one team. So that was another moment where we felt like we let not only ourselves down, but our country down by not winning that game. And it was just honestly like we didn't perform in that final. And playing in finals is not easy sometimes, especially the first few. The more finals you get to, the more you start to feel normal in them. The first few feel like You feel so much pressure. You're the only game out there.
Yeah.
That was another time where it's like, okay, well, let's learn from this. How did it feel out there? It didn't feel normal. Why didn't it feel normal? Okay, well, there was a whole bunch of people on the ice in bleachers watching our one game. We're not used to that. And
Yeah.
we started off shaky and then we couldn't get out of it. So we made notes and then tried to get better. And I
Wow.
think that's, yeah. And then at that point, we were heading into the women's ranks. So we were no
Right.
longer in junior and we were going to have to find ways to win those big games. So, and that's, I'll pause there.
Wait, glad I'm figured it out. For all of Canada, as we support your team, we're sure glad you guys figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you can't control an outcome, all you can do is control how you go into a game. So you can still be the best team and you can lose a game because the other team played very well and your misses were at the wrong time. But none of us are robots. So that's another thing. Like we can't control everything that goes out there. You can't control every movement in your body because we are human. So if the other team plays very well and we miss a couple of a couple shots at the wrong time, that can dictate the end result of a game. And curling is unique that way in that sometimes the lower ranked team can still very much outplay a team that's number one in the world. It's like that's very, very common in curling because you can just get firing. You can just, and you're feeling it and you're confident. And then all of a sudden you're making shots that are like low probability. And you're like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
We call it
That's
playing
fascinating.
free.
Yeah. That's a great, I mean, all athletes should play free. That's when you have your best moments, right? It's pretty tough to do anything under so much duress and stress, right? Yeah. Especially a sport like yours, which is so precise, right? Requires so much precision to succeed. Margins are pretty small. Yeah.
Ryan,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about the start of how you ended up in the NHL Combine and what that was like? Because I think people watch it, but what was it like being in it?
Yeah, this all came as a shock to me. So, fast forward from junior A in the Ottawa area on to, so I played for the Yale Bulldogs in the NCAA, and I get recruited and I had down to Yale at 17 years old. I'm a true freshman down there. I'm pretty young, and so I sort of stumble my way into the rankings, the pre-draft rankings in my second year. And so heading into that draft, I find myself ranked 60th in North America, which was a total shock to me, right? I wasn't this flashy player, this offensive player like these kids we see today at 12 years old on TikTok and Instagram. The amount of, there's the level of skill is incredible. That wasn't who I was. I was a really well-rounded, solid player, pretty much in every area. Wasn't elite in any area, but solid. So it was a bit of a shock to find myself on the combine ranking. And so the top 60 ranked players ahead of the draft get invited to this combine. So I'm ranked 60th. So I'm the last invite. So I always joked, I always knew at the combine I was the worst player there. But still better to be the worst player at the NHL Combine than not be there. So yeah, you head to the combine. I think what most people see are these poor kids being whipped on these bikes. And so it very much was that. It was in Toronto for me. And so you walk into a boardroom at a hotel downtown and there's all these tables around the perimeter and these different workout stations. And so, these NHL scouts are standing behind these tables watching you work out in a tank top and shorts with a number on the short. And, they're jotting down notes as they watch you. And they watch everything about you. They're not watching how many push-ups you do as much as they are watching your demeanor, your attitude, your compete level. And so, yeah, you pretty much got to go through the push-up station, the pull-up station, the bench press station, and onto the Wingate test, which is a horrible bike analysis that they often show on TSN, which I always get a kick out of. Pretty much the worst thing you can do.
Okay, pause.
Yeah.
Tell us more about why. Because watching someone go all out on a bike, it's exhausting, but elaborate a bit for people who haven't had to go all out on a bike.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's pretty sure it was like a 30-second test where you bike at a normal clip and then they effectively drop this weight. So they make the resistance go incredibly hard to the point where it's pretty difficult to pedal. And they just want to measure your max output over a 30 seconds. So you're going and there's people holding down the bike because it's so hard to pedal and you're using all of this power. And and they're screaming at you. And so whenever anyone does this 30-second test or a minute test, whatever it is, the whole room sort of stops and watches and then you get off and you just want to vomit. So they're measuring these outputs and they're analyzing data on your power, right? To see how much power you can put out. And, again, when Connor McDavid at 17 years old hops on a bike and does this, nobody cares what his results are. They're more looking at the people at the bottom end of the scale to say, well, what kind of athletes are these? Is someone going to shock you and just show you their athleticism? And so you may climb the ranks that way. But it'd be interesting to have somebody from the NHL on to talk about how much stock they put in these tests, other than just to intimidate the hell out of these athletes.
Well, or maybe just like an indication of how hard you're going to have to work. Between practice and games, you do have to, it's like all out rest, all out rest.
Yep.
So maybe it's just a bit of like, will you be able to handle it?
Totally.
How
And
much,
there's a lot, yeah, you're 17 years old. Just the environment was stressful, right? And then, that's part of it. And then the next part of it is NHL teams it's like a speed dating game where, they'll notify your agent or, whether they want to meet you, right? And so then you go through the hotel in these speed dating sessions with different NHL teams. And so there's really, it's looking back, very exciting opportunity, incredibly nerve-wracking. You walk into a boardroom and there's 20 NHL executives sitting behind one table and there's a chair there and you sit in it and they just ask you questions for half an hour. And that is really the most important pivotal moment, I would say, of the draft, where they're trying to decide, where do we draft you? How much of an investment do we make in you? And you often, again, most people would see this through TSN, and they're asking you to tell jokes. They're trying to see your personality come out. They're asking you who had big, impact on your life. They're just trying to get to know you. I can say that I had one consistent question from NHL teams when they interviewed me, and that was they felt skeptical or questioning my education. I went to Yale University. Their concern was, if we draft you, are you so invested in your education, your career, that you're not actually going to, focus on hockey? So that I was actually really surprised. And I suspect a lot of the Ivy League players who are at that level are getting questions, and there's just a different level of scrutiny. So yeah, that took me back a little bit, that they were really interested to know what my career plans were. And my comment back to them was, I'm here. I want to be a professional hockey player. So I had to address that head on.
That's surprising, because you think like well-balanced would be a sign of someone who would be a better, like, not only teammate, but well-rounded player. Mm-hmm. But yeah, everyone's perception of what a good player is could be different. But I'm surprised that you just choosing a really good school would cause that question. And
I had that reaction to many in the hockey community when I chose Yale at the time, was, not one of these powerhouse hockey experiences. They did really well. They've since won a national championship. Yale's up there. They're a good D1 program. If you have the choice to go to a hockey superpower or a good hockey program that's more of an academic superpower, if you're thinking long term about your hockey career, you should probably choose the big hockey powerhouse. That's what logic tells you. So some people did question me over that, but I'm a small kid from Rockland, Ontario. I have a chance to go to a great academic school like that. You take it. Yeah. And then, so that combine happens just before the draft, and then the draft happens later. It's in Toronto. And that was an interesting experience. And I haven't told this story much, but again, I'm ranked top 60 in North America. So, my agent, who's Larry Kelly at the time, he's since, passed on his practice, and the great Andy Scott in Ottawa is now working with a lot of those, well, no longer those athletes, but a lot of the same people went on to work with Andy Scott, who now works for Octagon in the Ottawa area. So most hockey players coming through at that level in Ottawa were represented by Larry Kelly. And so, Larry gets me to go to the draft for day 2, which is when the most kids get drafted. And it was interesting. My stock kept falling on draft day. I ended up getting drafted in the 7th round. The early anticipated window for me was 2 to 3. That's where they thought I would go, given where I was ranked. And I kept falling. And he kept coming up to me during the draft. This is like a great caution to anybody, and you hear it. Don't go to the draft. And the only reason I went and was told to go was because it was in Toronto. And he figured I'd go in the 2nd or 3rd round. And so he kept coming up to me in the stands in the ACC saying, yep, I just talked to so-and-so team. They're taking you with their next pick. We're talking 2nd, 3rd round. That team gets up to the mic. Don't take me. He keeps coming back. Oh, they're taking you in the 4th round. It's almost as if because I was still available and no one had taken me yet, they could push me back around. And so at the end of the day, I go in the 7th round, which was disappointing from where they projected me to go. Still incredible. I'm very proud of it. His assessment at the time was, yeah, that education, going to Yale, them feeling threatened by that from an investment point of view could have played a role. And we never really know. I never asked Colorado that at the end of the day when they ultimately took me. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting experience going through that.
No kidding. And how did you enjoy your time playing for Colorado?
So yeah, it's odd, right? You get drafted while I was still at Yale after year 2. So I played 4 years there. And then that's hurdle 1 for hockey players, right? This is what a lot of people don't realize. Getting drafted is the hard part. Actually signing the NHL contract is hurdle number 2, which is very, very hard to do, very rare. A lot of people get drafted, not a lot of people sign that contract. So heading into my 4th year at Yale, Colorado actually told me this later on when I was signed by them, that they actually decided to sign me to a contract after being at a game where I played BU, Boston University. We're in BU, we get pounded. Yale gets pounded 7-2, but I had 2 goals for Yale. I had this really, really good game. So Colorado later tells me that that's the day we decided to sign you to a contract. Once we knew you could play with the big boys, play on that stage and do well and still play your game, that's where we decided to pick you, or sign you. So to all those, this is a really good lesson, right? First of all, there's always people watching, right? There are scouts, there are reps, they're always out there watching, and they're assessing you in the difficult moments, not just the great moments. It's easy to beat a crappy team and perform well. It's really hard to do it against the top players at that age, at that level. And so I was really interested when the management told me later on that was the game. We were all there. We wanted to see how you played against a much better team and your demeanor when you were losing and all those sort of cheesy, intangible things. So, to your question, Emma, fast forward, I get signed. I go to their training camp. I don't make the team out of the gate. I never made the team, for clarity. I played for their AHL team for 3 years. But, getting to go through the experience of attending a training camp, being a signed player, meeting all of the big hotshots that Colorado had at the time, Joe Sakic, Hayduk, Tanguay, Blake, all those guys, was such a learning experience for me and really shaped the rest of my hockey career and much of my professional life too.
That's amazing. That's a very cool story because I feel like a lot of people watch hockey, but watch the Combine. I don't really get to hear kind of the inside story of what it's like to go and get drafted. And not enjoyable. Thankfully, we don't have to do that in curling. Just routine fitness testing, but not televised.
Yeah.
I was even, there's been like push-up challenges that go over Instagram where you video yourself doing push-ups for various reasons. The most recent one was a fundraiser for cancer. And I'm like, oh.
Jeez.
I don't
How many did you get?
I did 30.
That's good.
Yeah, that worked hard for a long time. Push-ups were always my weakness. I have very long limbs. Doing push-ups was always tough for me. So years ago, they ran us through fitness testing kind of at the end-ish of our junior career. And I think I shook through 7 bad reps. They weren't even... there, I could barely get 7. So that's something I've worked on very hard over the last, 15-ish years. Yeah.
I was a dummy at the Combine. Side story. Somebody told me after the Combine, one of the people doing the charting what the results were, that I had, I think, one of the highest push-up counts at the Combine that year. But the dummy side of it was you had to do bench press a little later. And so I muscled through push-ups. I took that so seriously. I crushed it. And then I did nothing on the bench.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Well, they should be separate. You should have a time to recover.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you do a max amount of push-ups, you can feel your upper body on fire.
You're done.
For the rest of the day. So you should definitely split those up onto 2 separate days.
Yeah. Okay, Emma, I'm sure many of your curling fans want to hear about some of the more visible success. The invisible successes are awesome and what shaped the team. Let's talk about your lead up to the Olympics. I know we're skipping so much. We could have a 5-hour podcast here that talks about your successes, but maybe you can sort of, you've talked about Worlds a little bit. Maybe, yeah, just give us more of an insight and behind the scenes on your international success.
Yeah. So in 2013, we won our first national championship, which is just called the Scotties Tournament of Hearts,
Yeah.
for curling for women. So we had our first world experience that year in 2013. And and then we won again in 2014. And then there was a bit of a break and we won in 2017. 2013, we got a bronze medal. In 2014, we got a silver. And then in 2017, we won. We
Amazing.
medaled all 3 times. It was a learning experience. In 2017, I don't know if Rachel missed a shot the whole time. We went undefeated. It was in Beijing. We had some family there.
Wow.
It was very cool to finally win after having gotten a bronze and then a silver. And then 2018 is the Olympic year. So we go off going undefeated at a world championship, coming home with the gold medal. And like 7 months after that, we're going into our Olympic trials, which were in Ottawa.
Right.
So we were the home team. We had all sorts of friends and family there. It was amazing. We won, and it was one of the coolest moments I've ever been a part of, winning in our hometown in Canadian Tire Center where the Sens play, where I grew up watching them from the crowd. I'm now on ice level, looking up at all of our friends and family and fans from Ottawa.
Yeah.
So one of the coolest moments of my curling career, one of the moments I'll never forget. I still get goosebumps. Like I currently have goosebumps talking about it.
Yeah, sweet.
So we go into that Olympics with very high expectations, given that we have medaled on the world stage every time we've gone. We won the year before. And little do we know how much emphasis other countries put on scouting. And we also had a lot of other countries have more time. The Olympic team is named a lot earlier, but in Canada, there's a lot of depth. So they have to run a trials.
Right.
So we had a couple months between when we won and then when we had to go and wear the maple leaf sliding over the Olympic rings. That time frame included Christmas, where there's some club closures. And so we were just trying to manage both rest, recovery, but also starting to train again to get ready for the Olympics. And I don't think we did it the best. We definitely went into the Olympics not fully rested and ready to go. We could have bounced out of it better. I think that's something that we, going forward, if that were to happen again, we'd know how to fight through it a little bit better. But we came out flat, and other countries that we historically had no issues beating those teams were firing. And they knew they were playing different strategy against us to battle like different shots to bring out weaknesses or to not allow us to play certain strategy on our end. And it was very surprising because we hadn't really thought about scouting a lot until that year.
And does that happen a lot in curling?
It does now.
Okay, but back then, that's not even that long ago, right? But
so Canada didn't, because Canada was always winning.
Right.
And then the other countries started scouting, but also putting a lot more resources into developing their curling programs. And then their teams got a lot better, started being more successful. And now it's not just like an automatic medal for Canada anymore. It is so hard. The world level, like curling has grown so much internationally. It used to be years ago, kind of like if Canada was going to get a medal, it was just which one. And now it's like a medal is hard to get, especially in women's curling. So we were like, we didn't know, and we started off rough. And then we had that incident, I think I've mentioned on a previous podcast, with a burnt rock, and we got just dragged through the mud media-wise. And that was challenging too, because not only are we battling performance and trying to get ourselves to play the best that we can, but now we're battling hate from the media. And then when our performance we're kind of like, we're the cat on the curtains, hanging on for dear life, trying to get anything out of our performance and everything. Then we have to battle. And you can ignore social media, but there's reporters live asking you about it. So it's not like you can fully ignore. So that was like just it almost was like the perfect storm of all sorts of things that happened that kind of created this environment that became very hard to perform in. And we did battle. We ended up putting ourselves in a position where we could qualify for the playoffs. And we ended up losing on last rock to Scotland in our second last round robin game. And that pushed us out of the playoffs and put them in. So it was kind of like whoever won got through and whoever lost didn't.
Jeez.
So that was really disappointing. I remember for months after just being like, I wish we didn't even go, because not going and not performing felt so awful, especially having won the Worlds the year before. And then I felt like we were letting the country down, but also like everything about it, it just felt this weight. And it was this like, I don't want to use depression, but they call it like the post-Olympic depression. And that's a real thing for many athletes. It's like you build up for 4 years towards this thing that you really want to go to, like this event and it's only every 4 years. There's so much media and emphasis on it. And then it's over. And even athletes who do well go into sometimes this little funk, because it's like, what now? Like you're
such an emotional high.
Yeah, it's just an emotional roller coaster. So, and then not performing, I feel like that made it worse. So
But then just to interject there, because I think you've talked about this, you're now, the weight of the Canadian curling world is coming down on you. You're the first team to not play for a medal. So you're facing issues bigger even than yourselves. You're representing Curling Canada. So I'm sure you can talk about it now, but part of that is going into this feeling that you're feeling coming home too, right? So that's really tragic to hear that, there's that sentiment coming home, because that's your first Olympics, right?
Yeah, it was.
To feel that way is tough.
Yeah, and then for a bit I was like low, and then I tried to reflect on like why I felt that way. And then it took a bit, and then I was like, no, that's actually so cool. Like, so few people get to say they got to go to the Olympics. Results aside, I earned my right to be there. I was not named there. We won that game to go. We won the World's year before. It's not like it was a fluke. We earned that spot, and we deserved it. And so I started to change my mindset about that. And then I also started to change my mindset about putting so much emphasis on just one event, because we thought, like, prior to that, I was like, I just want to get to the Olympics. I just want to get to the Olympics. And everything else was just a stepping stone to getting to the Olympics.
Right.
And then after having gone, I was like, why do all those other events not matter? Like, why is it that just like flashing by me? I'm not even absorbing or digesting how cool it is that we won a Scotties, we won a Worlds, like Grand Slams that we go to.
Yeah.
Those are sweet. All this stuff that I get to do as an athlete that's not the Olympics isn't building towards the Olympics.
Right.
Those are individual events that are awesome to be a part of and can't just be taken for granted, or just like, oh, this is my stepping stone towards this one thing every 4 years. And I started to enjoy everything a lot more, because I was like, Olympics aside, all this other stuff still matters, and still like the Olympics doesn't define me as an athlete. Everything, this whole picture, the whole package of curling, that's all those events matter. And so then I really, now even like we will be trying to compete in November to go back to the Olympics. But I would love to go. Rachel and I would love to go back. Sarah and Tracy haven't gone. They would love to go.
No kidding.
But it's not everything. Like, it'd be great. We're going to try super hard, but we can't control the outcome of what happens at the trials. And we've also accomplished so many other cool things. So
maybe the best thing you're going to accomplish, sorry, I'll let you finish, is you'll play free. You have this less of a burden that you've got to do it. Maybe you'll play free. Maybe you'll enjoy the experience of even getting to the Olympics more than you did last time. And yeah,
I hope so. And I think that there's always lessons learned too about even just how to manage the media and stuff. And we learned there too that we need someone on the ground with us who can manage the media, because we didn't have that last time. And someone so we have someone who kind of manages our media and has come with us to Worlds. And she does such a great job in just managing that side and being a barrier. So it's not directly at us. And so we're like, yeah, we need that, because that we need that barrier. We can't have questions go rogue like that where it could throw us
Hmm.
off our game again. So that's, yeah,
Hmm.
we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, hopefully we have
Jeez.
the opportunity to go back, but at least like we
You
know
will.
that it doesn't define us as athletes. So
Good for you. That's
yeah,
a really mature, reasoned lesson I think a lot of
yeah,
people can learn. One of the things, well, hearing you talk, one of the stories that I like to tell too is managing pressure. My son actually asked me this recently, how I felt. We were talking about, I played against the Detroit Red Wings in an exhibition game. And so, I got to take the private jet from Denver all the way to Detroit, play the Red Wings. And the Red Wings and the Avs at that time in 2004 are sort of at the height of their rivalry. It runs deep in the red and maroon. And so, young kid, first time, get to take a plane. That's pretty cool. Get to play in this legendary building, the Joe Louis in Detroit. I was just totally encompassed and totally weighted down with nerves. I was so nervous that my parents talked about seeing me before the game. They just didn't even know what to do or say to me. I just looked like white. And that was always a regret of mine, just not enjoying the moment, not playing free. You get this opportunity and you're playing against legends. I'm taking faceoffs against Steve Yzerman. I mean, these guys are legends. Shanahan, Lidstrom. So just getting to be on the ice with them, totally and I wasn't able to really, I played fine, but I didn't get to enjoy the moment as much as I wish I would have. So yeah, different scale when you're telling your 11-year-old how he should feel during a really meaningless hockey game, but it's not meaningless to them. And so, that's something I try to do is impart some of these feelings and with the context that I have to help kids better manage their emotions and just be in the moment, right? And not be defined by a result, but to enjoy the process. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I have been saying that every single time someone's like, if you go back in time
Hmm.
and tell young Emma a tidbit of advice,
Hmm.
just to make one thing easier, I would say enjoy it, because
Yeah.
it just flashes before you and you feel the highs and lows, like I said, but enjoy those highs and lows because that's what makes us human. That's what makes
Mhm.
sport fun. That's what makes sport so cool, is that we aren't robots. We are human and we have to
Yeah.
enjoy it. Otherwise, why are we doing it?
Yeah. And I think last week we talked to Dr. Amy Latimer Chung, and some of the things she said were really interesting when she asked us what were our most memorable experiences with sport. You and I didn't talk about the wins, right? Or I didn't talk about being drafted or any of those things. It was the experience and being on those teams. So yeah, it really is. And maybe this is what makes the best athletes in the world special and unique. It isn't their skill, it's their ability to manage, right? Manage their physical limitations and rise to the occasion and block everything out. Because, when some of these real big talents play in their first games, they're not overcome with fear and anxiety the way I was. They're better able to handle it. And you're in that category, it seems to, I know your team and you have sort of fought your way up at every stage and defied the odds, but you guys are able to do it. And that's a special feeling to be able to get past all that. And so, I think kids really are dealing with this at a young age, just like professionals are, or people at the top of the sport like you and your team, just different level, right? And we as parents and coaches need to be there to help them through it, not just with the physical things, but the coping and dealing with pressures. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we could talk forever about
I
that.
know.
But we'll save some for
Yeah.
another episode of
Yeah.
a little bit about us. But I
Yeah.
hope everyone enjoyed hearing a little
Mm.
bit more about Ryan and I, our pasts, how we got into sport. And I think that we have a lot more to talk about in that area that we'll save for another episode.
Totally.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, everyone's enjoying their summers right now and any sport that you're involved in. Just remember, enjoy the moment.
That's right. Well said, Emma. Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks for listening to Rinkside.